What's going on, everybody? Welcome in to this stream on this Tuesday afternoon. I'm here to talk about free agency. This is pure potential. You already know that. Otherwise, you wouldn't already be here in the chat. We got Wendell in the chat, Piero in the chat. My buddy Chris is here. James is here. Appreciate you guys being here, ready to go, ready to rock, talk about some of these early free agency moves. We've had a good amount of action so far, obviously, and it's been interesting to keep track, see the sentiment from the market, see the sentiment on Twitter. People have different opinions about these moves, good or bad for the players themselves, good or bad for the players that are on the new offenses, things like that. So excited to jump into it here in a second. Shout out to Tiptoe Tooth and Carter, Ben and Ryan and Julian, one of our members, Freelster, another one of our members, one of the OGs. Cameron is here. A lot of guys, a lot of people here ready to go. I love it. I am streaming to Twitter for the first time. It was kind of hard to figure out how to do that. And as far as I'm aware, I have no way of getting the chat from Twitter into my feed here. So if you are watching on Twitter and you are typing in the chat, I apologize. I cannot see it. If you have something you want to ask me or whatever, you can head over to the YouTube channel, Pure Potential, and you can certainly drop a message in the chat there. But if you're watching from Twitter, from X, I appreciate it. And we are going to get underway here. So probably have time for questions as we go, especially questions that are related to the players we're going to talk about. But I'm just going to go through these signings and trades, talk about how I view the new situations. And I want to look at some actual dynasty trades that have been made over the past day or so, because I think how I feel about these moves is ultimately going to depend on the market. How much are new situations going to be factored into the cost of these players? That is a really big piece of the puzzle. So we can say, yeah, this is good for player X, but if the market is overestimating how good it is, I'm going to sell that player, right? If I think this is bad for a player, but the market's overcorrecting, I'm going to buy that player. So that's what I care about, how the market reacts. And we're going to start with Justin Fields. So we're going to jump in here with Justin Fields. Just going to throw this up on the screen here so we can keep track of who we're talking about at the time and just make that easier. So Justin Fields, obviously moving from the Steelers over to the Jets, signs a 2-year, $40 million deal with the Jets. Not massive money, especially for a quarterback in today's NFL. This is very much a prove it deal. This is very much not long-term contract security. Sam Darnold got significantly more money than this. But this is a good opportunity for Justin Fields, who, played all right through 6 games last year, had the Steelers at 4-2. I think, a lot of that has to do with the defense, but either way, played well enough to get himself this chance at another audition in a new city. And this is great for Justin Fields. So let's just start with that. He looks like one of the smartest buys of the offseason at this point. I did point him out. I think I pointed him out in the buys episode. If I didn't, I should have. But I definitely liked the idea of buying in on Fields for the price of, a mid to late second he could have been had for, especially in season, just after the season. It just seemed very likely he was going to land a starting gig because this is a poor draft class. There's really only 2 guys that are being heavily considered for week 1 starting spots. And there were a number of quarterback openings around the league. There's just a lot of teams that needed quarterbacks. It seemed like Fields was a guy in the whole musical chairs that was likely to land on a team as a starter. He does. And that being said, I don't necessarily love chasing his price up the board. I think he's going to get pretty expensive pretty quick because he does score like a QB1 when he's on the field. So now people are going to feel pretty confident about him starting the year for the Jets, 16, 17 games if he's healthy. And he's going to score like a QB1. He's going to project to score like a top 12 quarterback. But again, the money in this contract is not massive. And so I don't know if I have enough confidence in Fields as a player, in the organizational infrastructure that the Jets have set up around him, that this is going to just be, all sunshine and rainbows for him. It could still be a bumpy ride, and it's not a guarantee that he's going to survive another offseason, especially if the Jets have a poor record. None of that is guaranteed. So what I can say for sure is, as long as he's a starter, he's going to be a guy that you can confidently play as probably a low-end QB1 at worst, and that's great. That has value. If he's going to get chased up into the first-round price range, I'm pretty much going to be out on that. So again, a guy that would have been better to buy earlier, better to buy before this happened. And that's really a common theme with free agency, with anything that we can kind of expect is going to happen. You want to be ahead of that news because the market is probably lagging behind it. So, here we go. All right, this is some verification that I did advise buying Justin Fields. He bought Fields for Blake Corum and the 2025 408. Yeah, that's a sweet deal. You shouldn't have even been able to do that in the offseason at any point. But that's amazing. This is completely unrelated to the topic at hand, but I have to shout it out. Brock Bowers and Swift for Kincaid, Ayuk in the 110. That's crazy work. Great job. So a couple of good deals there for you guys. Now let's talk about the Jets, the rest of the Jets, which is really just two players, right? There's really only two relevant players on the Jets outside of the quarterback. That's Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall. I tweeted out yesterday that I don't really see how anyone can spin this as a positive for Garrett Wilson. Lots of people were attempting to spin this as a positive for Garrett Wilson. Even accounts that I think are, fairly sharp. I really don't see it. Now, the case that has been made, or at least there's only really two arguments I've seen made that make any sense at all. One of them is Garrett Wilson played with Justin Fields in college and he was good. So let's just start there. That's a stupid argument. Justin Fields as a college quarterback is not the same thing as Justin Fields as an NFL quarterback. Let's just completely just put that out in the open. That is not the same thing. I don't care if they're buddies. I don't care if they have quote unquote chemistry. That's not the issue here in the Justin Fields formula. The second argument is, how can you say it's bad for Garrett Wilson? Don't you know DJ Moore had his best season with Justin Fields? Okay, this is technically true. DJ Moore had his best career season in 2023 with Justin Fields as his quarterback. But we need to put some context to that season. Okay, DJ Moore had 136 targets, I believe. Forgot to write it down. It was 130 something in 17 games. So let's just say, first of all, that's not that many targets, okay? That's borderline top 10 targets in any given season, which is good, right? But again, this is the ceiling argument that's being made. He had that many targets. That was on nearly a 30% target share. So he had to seriously consolidate the offense just to get up to on the fringe of top 10 target numbers. The reason that he had a wide receiver one season was that he was vastly outproducing or outpacing his expected fantasy points per game. He kept breaking off these huge plays. I remember distinctly this one primetime game where he took two different curl routes where he caught it and then he spun out of a tackle and ran for another 50-yard touchdown. I think he had 40 fantasy points just in that one game. But basically it was all DJ Moore's yak ability, creating these big plays week after week after week, that eventually got him to a wide receiver 9 season in points per game. And that's great. It was a good, impactful season for DJ Moore. The point is, if that's the ceiling case that's being presented for Garrett Wilson, that if he can consolidate to a 30% target share, which is a top 10 number in the NFL, and if he can then be more efficient than he's ever been in any season of his career, because he's never had over 2 yards per out run. So if he can be a leading target earner and take a big jump forward in efficiency and, break a bunch of big plays, then he can finish as a low end wide receiver 1. And I just don't think people understand the equation of floor versus ceiling. If the ceiling for Garrett Wilson is to finish as the wide receiver 9, he is overpriced. Just bottom line, he's overpriced. If you're drafting a wide receiver that's not a rookie in the first 3 rounds of a startup draft, you should feel pretty confident that they could finish top 5 if things went right for them. The floor matters, and he has a decently high floor because he's really talented. if there's no top 5 ceiling, it's just really hard to get behind the price. I've seen other people saying like, you should have known this was going to be the outcome because there were no better options. That's fair. That's fair. Like maybe I could have been a little bit more proactive in saying like, we need to fade Wilson at this price. I did say I would sell him for the 102 a couple weeks ago. But maybe I should have been more proactive knowing like Rodgers was going to be gone. Darnold wasn't coming back to New York. There weren't really any other better quarterback options. That's a fair criticism. But to say that this is somehow a good thing for Wilson, I just don't see it at all. I think he's very likely to continue being like a 14 to 15 points per game wide receiver that just doesn't make a whole lot of impact. And he's going to, you know, be another year older. The Jets might again win enough games where they're not really in position to get a good quarterback. It's just a really bad spot for him. You know, it's similar to the early parts of DJ Moore's career, Allen Robinson's career. Some of these wide receivers are just perpetually plagued with bad quarterback play. Someday we're going to get Garrett Wilson on a real offense, and he's going to show everybody like the type of upside that he has, maybe, but I don't know when that's going to be. So I'm really struggling with his price. I think that the market is going to ultimately move him down. Like, I think the people on Twitter that are promoting this situation for him are a minority. I think most people are going to see this as a bad thing. And maybe his value corrects to a point where I get back in. But right now, I'm pretty much out on Wilson at cost. I wouldn't be panic selling him. Like I wouldn't just go sell him for, you know, like the 107 or something. Like I don't think that's necessarily the right move. If you can still get the 103, the 104, something like that, or you can pivot to another wide receiver, you know, pivot to a JSN, something like that. Maybe sell him for like Chris Olave plus. I think there are ways to move him at this point if you want to. Breece Hall is the other player here. I'm kind of mixed on Breece Hall. I'm not as concerned about it as I am with Garrett Wilson. Justin Fields does have a pretty high check down rate in his career, which isn't the norm for mobile quarterbacks, which is kind of the concerning thing is like mobile quarterbacks usually don't check down that much to running backs. Justin Fields has done it a little bit more than an average quarterback. The rushing efficiency for Breece Hall should improve. That is something that is pretty well documented with mobile quarterbacks. It just opens up more rushing lanes naturally because defenders have to account for the quarterback. So all in all, you know, we'll see what kind of touchdown opportunities he has, but I do believe in Breece Hall. I'm probably willing to buy him if his value continues to dip. Probably would be willing to buy him right now for like the 105, something like that. If that's value that you can get in your league, I'm down to buy in, but I could definitely understand concern just about this offense not being very functional. Let me catch up on the chat here, see if there are any other questions about Fields. Oh, I got to get my boy, that one, Candy Bar, another one of our members, longtime members in here, checking in from work. Love to see it. Bindle's in the chat as well. Happy to see you. He's got his own YouTube channel if you guys want to look him up. Bindle's does some Dynasty stuff, does some best ball stuff. He knows what he's talking about. Yeah, Wilson, I mean, people kind of mirroring my thoughts here about Wilson just not really being able to catch a break. It's unfortunate, but it happens. Wendell, if you can sell Garrett Wilson for Ladd McConkey, you need to do that like yesterday. Even if you have to add, that is something you definitely want to be doing. All right, let's move on here to Sam Darnold. Oh, you know what? One thing before we move on to Justin Fields, I forgot what I wanted to take a look at some of the recent trades. So I've pulled up here on dynastydaddy.com. They have a trade database, and I like this because you can look at specific dates, and you can also look at specific settings. So I've pulled up trades in Superflex, half PPR or full PPR, 12-team leagues, and I've just pulled these up since yesterday. So there's already like 30-plus trades that we can look at here, and the most recent ones are listed right here at the top. We have Justin Fields and Wan'Dale Robinson for Chase Brown. Just looking at these deals, like instinctually, I'm leaning Chase Brown here. I think it's not that far off though. 111 or Justin Fields. I'm going to take the first round pick here. 2 seconds for Fields. That feels like a fair price to pay just now that we know for sure he's a starter. Fields for CJ Stroud. I'm not really sure what's going on here. Obviously, you're not trading CJ Stroud for Justin Fields. That's absurd. Fields and Palmer for the 110. I'm taking the 110. Fields and Corley for the 110. I'll take the 110. So most of these deals that I'm seeing here at the top are deals where I would take the other side. And that's why I said it matters what the market thinks. I can say, hey, this is good for Fields. If this is what his cost is in leagues that I'm in, I'm just not going to roster him because I can find better ways to spend value than taking on a risky quarterback for this price. So I sent out a trade. According to Dead Meme, I sent out a trade, the 201 and Justin Fields for the 102. Yes, that would be a very good trade. I would want the 102 there. Yeah, so I don't really love these deals, right? There's a lot of deals here. I'm not looking at all of them. Jordan Whittington, Zamir White in the 110 for Justin Fields. I don't really care about these other two pieces, but give me the 110. Sam Darnold for Justin Fields. I think that's like, you can kind of go either way there. We'll talk about Darnold in a minute. So I think that's fine. Justin Fields for the 109 and Brenton Strange. Give me that pick. So Chris, the question is, when is it time to look to sell Fields? I mean, it seems like there's a lot of hype behind him right now. I guess you could see the hype grow further if the Jets are able to add, another significant wide receiver piece in the draft or something, or bolster the offensive line. Or he gets into the season and he starts to score points. But it seems like right now there are pretty good deals available out there. So I'd be fine to sell him now if you can get like the 109. You just want to put the feelers out there and see what you can do. Dylan, as far as Justin Fields being a good thing for Wilson, like I said, I went back and I was talking about it for a while. If you want to go back in the stream, I do not think it's a good thing for Garrett Wilson. He had a bad quarterback last year, and Rodgers, I don't know if bad seems like an oversimplification. I think Rodgers was pretty average for most of the year. And more importantly, this is a stat that I had glossed over, but more importantly, the Jets averaged 35 pass attempts per game last year. That's a lot. 35 pass attempts. That was like top 5. Fields for his career averages 25 pass attempts per game. And in his best season, or I should say highest season, it was 28. So we've just never seen Fields maintain passing volume anywhere close to what we saw in New York last year. Now that's going to be offset a little bit by the departure of Adams, because Wilson should have an easier time consolidating a large target share. And I do think he'll have a high target share, but I don't think it's going to be enough to overcome the significant drop off in attempts that we should see, because Justin Fields scrambles a lot and he takes a lot of sacks, and that pulls pass attempts out of the offense. And then on top of that, you need to trust that the passes he does throw are going to be on target and catchable and all that other stuff. So I don't think it's a good thing. And that's where I stand with Wilson. So moving on here to our next free agent, it's going to be Sam Darnold. He moves over from the Vikings after that big season. He goes over to the Seahawks on a 3-year deal for $110 million. He gets $55 million guaranteed. This is very similar to the Baker Mayfield contract that he got after his 2023 season. So the Seahawks trade away Geno, and we're going to talk about Geno as well. But first, we're going to talk about Darnold. The team decided they wanted to get younger at quarterback. They saved a little bit of money at quarterback, and they go over to Darnold. I don't love this for the Seahawks. Like, if I was a Seahawks fan, I wouldn't be very happy about this. But we're going to talk about Dynasty. I do see some more field stuff in the chat here. Just let me double check and see if there's anything worth throwing in here. No, we're going to move on. We're going to move on from that. It's just kind of rehashing stuff we already talked about. So my first instinct with Darnold, again, this was a guy that was worth investing in Dynasty when he was super cheap. He was a great hold for people that picked him up off waivers or bought him for a second or a third last year. Now he gets this contract with the Seahawks, and that might be considered contract security. And to an extent it is. Like, he's going to start all of this season. He's probably going to start multiple seasons in Seattle. The question is, what level of success is he going to find in those starts? Nate, you, welcome. First of all, welcome to the stream. I see you've been in the chat for a bit now. I'm not sure who you're saying is exonerated. Are you saying that I'm exonerated for my JSN takes, or you are for your takes, or is JSN exonerated for some crime that he may have committed. You don't have to clarify that for me, but my first instinct is to sell Darnold off of this contract. We have to rewind a second to the pre-Minnesota days for Sam Darnold. He was arguably the worst quarterback in the NFL for 5 years. Certainly that's subjective to a degree, but you look at a lot of metrics. He's the one who appears in the bottom left corner of a lot of charts. And outside of like 3 good games that he played for the Panthers, he just never looked like he was going to be that guy. Then he lands on the Vikings with Kevin O'Connell, who is, I think, clearly a top 3 play caller in the NFL. He has Justin Jefferson, he has Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson. He has a very good infrastructure around him to find success. And I know this has been talked about ad nauseum, but suddenly you get him into this system, and 5, 6, 7 weeks into the season, people start to talk themselves into Darnold like, oh man, he's actually really good and he's really turned a corner. He's amazing now. Like he look at this guy go. And his last 2 games of the year kind of cooled that off a little bit. Certainly because he looked awful in those 2 games, but people still, I think, are overrating like how much of that success was actually on Sam Darnold. I think not as much as most people would say. So he's going from what is basically a perfect situation to a very uncertain situation in Seattle. You have a new offensive coordinator in Clint Kubiak. Now, to be fair, he does run a similar style of offense to Kevin O'Connell. It comes from that sort of Shanahan tree. That's a good thing for Darnold. But you also have basically one weapon in JSN and no other pass catchers that are notable. It is not Jake Bobo season. It's not AJ Barner season. You've got one viable wide receiver, and they don't have the offensive line to really make that work, I don't think. So I'm very worried about what this is going to look like for Darnold. You have this tweet from Josh Norris. Geno Smith was pressured on 38.5% of his dropbacks last season, despite having the 11th quickest time to throw at 2.82 seconds. Sam Darnold's time to throw was the 3rd longest last year at 3.08, and he was pressured at the 4th highest rate. So people like to throw out the pressure rate stats and say, see, Darnold was pressured at almost the same amount as Geno, and look how good he was. He was pressured almost the same amount as Geno because he held the ball significantly longer than Geno did, because he's not a fast processor. So the issue for Darnold is going to be, if this line doesn't significantly improve, he's going to find himself having to process more quickly, get the ball out more quickly, not make bad decisions, not take bad sacks. What we saw in the Rams game in the playoffs was him taking a whole bunch of bad sacks because he could not process the field. He could not decide where to throw the ball. That's a significant concern to me. So yeah, I don't think he's going to get benched with the Seahawks. I also don't think he's going to be like a low-end QB1, high-end QB2 like he was last year. So I would be looking to move him personally. If you can get a first for him, that seems like a no-brainer. I don't care if it's a 2027 first. If you can get a first, absolutely. Maybe add a piece on to try to get that first. People need quarterbacks. People make crazy moves like that. But there's a lot of ways I think you could move around with him. I'm curious to see what the market says. We're going to talk about JSN and Kenneth Walker, then we're going to talk about Geno Smith. But real quick, I do want to go over to the trade database and put in Sam Darnold's name and just see what kind of moves are out there. Oh, and look at this. We've been graced by the Dynasty Daddy YouTube account. I'm just about to switch over to your website right now and throw in Sam Darnold's name here. Thank you for the helpful website. Love seeing these trades that have come in the last 2 days. All right, yep. And so this is kind of what I expected to see. First trade we get right here, 2026 first for Sam Darnold. That's an easy call for me. I mean, really, genuinely, just such an easy call for me. You have Darnold and the 109 for the 105 and the 305. That one I'm not as crazy about because I don't know if there's going to be like a massive gap between 105 and 109. So I don't love that. This one, though, 103 and 303 in this year's draft for Darnold and the 202. I think that's a good deal. You're getting up into that like elite range of prospects there. That seems like a good deal. Darnold for the 112 feels like totally fair to me, like pretty much an even swap. Definitely if I have a surplus of quarterbacks, I'm fine, selling Darnold as my 4th quarterback and getting that 112. Fine with that. Down here, we have some more reasonable trades. I have no issue if someone wants to trade Shakir for Sam Darnold. That's fine. Like, that's a low risk move if you need a quarterback. Darnold for Richardson, that's really just like a preference thing. You know, Richardson's going to have more volatility for sure. Also has the higher scoring potential. So, you know, can't blame anybody either way. 2 seconds, that's a fine price. Again, same thing here. So it's not like the Fields thing where most trades are going to automatically be towards the non-Field side. It seems like you have a mixture of opinions about Darnold. And it's really going to come down to how much people trust what they saw last year. People that are bought into his ability from last year are going to see this as like a clear place to buy him. Like, oh, look at this. He was great last year. Now JJ McCarthy's not behind him. He's got 3 years on this deal. He's going to be a starter. Those people are going to be willing to pay more. Whether or not one of those people is in your league remains to be seen, right? You don't know, like, that's not a guarantee. So go out and put him on the block, or go ask around to teams that need quarterbacks and see what they think if you have Darnold. Otherwise, it's not like the worst thing in the world to just hold on to him, right? So especially in the near term, because again, he's not going to get benched. I just think he could struggle. Yeah, Tiptoe, if it was in the last 2 days, then it was probably your deal. It says today. I'm not sure how long it takes for those to like load in, but if it was today, there's a good chance it was your deal. So anyway, that's a good place to look and see what's going on here. Devin T said biggest winner of this move is JJ McCarthy. Yeah, so JJ McCarthy, you know, is absolutely a winner. Now for me, this is not surprising. I didn't think there was much chance at all that Sam Darnold was going to return to the Vikings, because I didn't think a franchise tag, frankly, made any sense for either side. This is Sam Darnold's best chance to get a long-term contract, and the Vikings would probably just be pissing him off by franchise tagging him, and I just didn't really see what the benefit would be for that team. I thought McCarthy was very likely to be the week 1 starter. It's why I've said on multiple occasions I think he's been one of the most mispriced players in Dynasty for quite a while. At this point, I think people are going to start to wake up to that fact that he's going to be the starter in what is essentially a quarterback-proof system with insane weapons, who is now also like working to beef up the offensive line for him. I think it's going to be great for McCarthy. I think he's going to be a big riser when he gets on the field. So if you can still buy him, take a shot, take a shot at it. But I think it's going to be a lot harder than it would have been a month ago. And really nothing's materially changed all that much. As far as the other pieces involved, I have a negative view on this for JSN. Look, I've never really gotten the JSN take correct, so I'll probably be wrong on this too. But I do think that the offense is going to be worse with Darnold than with Geno. Like I said, I think it's going to be hard with that line for him to sustain success. And maybe the loss of DK Metcalf is enough to level that out, because JSN should absorb some of the target share there. I think he's capable of absorbing a little bit more of a target share there. But I do think that Seattle's going to add somebody in the draft. Like, if not in the first round, at some point they're going to. They're not just going to roll into the season with JSN and Jake Bobo at wide receiver. So, that's going to level things out a bit. And in general, just a worse offense and a worse quarterback, in my opinion, is not necessarily great for a wide receiver. So he's still going to have a fairly high floor as a PPR guy. He's going to get plenty of targets. I don't know what the ceiling is going to look like with Darnold at quarterback. Parker, this is a tough question. Do I prefer JJ or Purdy? Offhand, I don't know where I have them ranked. I'd say I have them pretty close. And I would guess that I prefer McCarthy. Let's see. I'll pull it up. I'll just pull it up right now. If anybody's interested in my rankings, which I do have, and I have the rookie picks also in my rankings, you can become a YouTube member. Link in the description. Right now I have JJ McCarthy ranked one spot ahead of Brock Purdy. So I have him pretty much in a tier with Purdy, Lawrence, Prescott. I view those guys pretty similarly, like not all the same archetype of quarterback, but pretty similarly as far as how they should be valued. And I do have him the highest of that group, because I have pretty high confidence that he's going to produce, and he's very, very young. So the only other piece that I care about here in Seattle is Kenneth Walker. A worse offense, like in terms of total scoring, is never going to be ideal for a running back. In general, I'm still bullish on Kenneth Walker. I still think he's mostly undervalued, mostly because of Clint Kubiak. If you think about Alvin Kamara last year, how he thrived in a dysfunctional offense in New Orleans. It didn't really matter that offense wasn't firing on all cylinders for most of the year. Kamara was getting peppered with targets, which isn't necessarily new for him. But I do think that the QBX system is going to fit Walker's skill set pretty well. So I'm still into him. Definitely just takes a little bit of a hit with this quarterback move. Mike, this is a logical take to say that DK stretched the field and drew double teams, but we saw last year in the 1 or 2 games that DK was out, they actually used JSN in more of a downfield role. He had a much higher ADOT in those games, and he was extremely productive. So I think it's possible that he's just genuinely good enough to fill in that spot, and he might end up having a little bit more of a diverse utilization, more of a diverse route tree where he is used in some of those intermediate situations, and that could be good for him. It's just whether the ball's getting there consistently and accurately and all that. But yeah, and I think it's likely that they're going to add a wide receiver. I just don't see how they could not add someone. I mean, there are still some veterans out there that are not signed. Keenan Allen, Stephon Diggs are not signed. Amari Cooper's not signed. You know, Amari Cooper is somebody who I think is pretty much toast at this point. But if you think of somebody that could play that outside role and try to stretch the field a little bit like DK did, it would make some sense there. But yeah, I mean, it's not going to be a player as good as DK Metcalf, that's for sure. Looking over at the Raiders side, just while we're here on all the fallout of the Seattle moves, Geno moving to the Raiders, I would not necessarily call it an upgrade, but I am intrigued. I think Geno's been pretty underpriced. I think he's underrated as a talent. We've got Pete Carroll taking over the team, and then Chip Kelly running the offense. He's getting his second shot to run an offense. I think it's going to look a lot different than the first time when he was with my Eagles, which was really fun at first and then really not fun the next couple of years. The O-line, I don't think really can be worse than what Geno dealt with in Seattle last year. And then you look at Brock Bowers, obviously an incredible option for Geno, and then Jacoby Myers is also a solid wide receiver. So I'm intrigued. You know, if you go and take Genty at 6 or one of the tier 2 running backs in the early second, like, you know, Judkins or something, I really think this offense could get rolling. I think it could be better than people think. And this is great for Brock Bowers, just so clearly the tight end 1. He was already the tight end 1, but this is really a nice floor raiser for him. Like, the difference between Aiden O'Connell and Geno Smith really cannot be overstated. He's just going to make the offense so much more stable, I think. And then Jacoby Myers is going to be undervalued for like the 5th year in a row. Brandon is pointing that out right here. Might be a sneaky buy for the Raiders. Jacoby Myers has been a sneaky buy for like 5 years. Like he just always produces. He's going to give you another year of like 14 points per game for the price of a mid to late second. It's just a great option to go out and get him, especially if you play in like a start 10 or start 11 PPR league where you need those extra flex spots. Really good bang for your buck with Jacoby Myers. He's not going to win you your league, but he can absolutely add a little bit of stability at the wide receiver position. That pretty much covers everything for the Darnold Geno situation. We're going to move on to our first non-quarterback here, and maybe I'll try to keep it moving a little bit faster because otherwise we're going to be here for 2 hours. But the next guy is Davante Adams. He goes to the Rams on a 2-year deal, $44 million, $26 million guaranteed. I absolutely love this for Davante Adams. And as a personal like investor in Davante Adams in Dynasty, I picked him up in a number of leagues last year where I was competitive and I was hoping, you know, he would take me to the promised land. He was good last year, wide receiver 9 in points per game. And he still has juice, in my opinion. I think he still has it. I don't think he's like Cooper Kupp. I don't think he's like DeAndre Hopkins, where these guys have clearly lost a step or lost some elusiveness. Adams he's not prime Adams right now, but he was still 2.19 yards per out run last year, 0.27 targets per out run. He was playing in 2 bad offenses, still maintained some per out efficiency. Garrett Wilson could not get to 2 yards per out run on the Jets last year. Adams did. In fact, Graham Barfield pointed this out from Fantasy Points. In their 11 games together, Davante Adams was better than Garrett Wilson in average separation score, yards per out run, targets per out run, and route win rate. Now, I think Garrett Wilson's a great wide receiver, but that's pretty interesting to me that even at age 31, Davante Adams was still outclassing him on the field. Now, their deployment matters. Aaron Rodgers' propensity to throw it to Adams, that matters. The point is, he was not like a shell of himself, like we saw from Cooper Kupp last year, or even, Keenan Allen at times. And this is the best offense that he's been in by far since he played with Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay. I mean, this is the Rams are a great offense. Matt Stafford is still slinging it. He is still playing at a very high level. You've got Puka Nacua there to draw defenders away. This is going to be a good passing game. Really good passing game. Now, if there's any discount on Puka Nacua, I think it should go without saying, you should go out and jump on that. Like, this is not something that has me worried about Puka Nacua's outlook. The entire offense is going to funnel through these two guys, and I do think that Puka is the better wide receiver. So I'm not worried about him at all. But I think this is great for Adams. Brandon, just addressing that right now, you mentioned in the chat, I'm not worried about Puka at all. He's still right there at the top of the wide receiver rankings, right alongside guys like CeeDee Lamb, Brian Thomas, Amon-Ra St. Brown. So I'm not worried. But I am very happy for Adams here. I think this is going to be big for his value, which was really tumbling a bit in the offseason, as it tends to do with these older players, especially when there's uncertainty about their situations. He was falling to like late second value. In fact, I think I did a startup where I took like the 207 over Adams. And had I known he was going to be on the Rams, I wouldn't have done that. I did it because I thought it was a bit of a safer investment where I could, flip that pick later on. And I'll stand by it. Like, I think it was fine process. But you can be handsomely rewarded when you invest in these older veterans that are still good, because sometimes things just align perfectly. And this is the case. This is a perfect case of that. I think Stafford himself remains a solid rental quarterback in Superflex. He's 37 years old. I don't know how many more years he's going to play, especially at his current level of ability, but he's only valued around the price of a mid-second. I think he's kind of an ideal QB3 option if you have limited buying power to work with. He's a guy who can go out and give you like the same type of production as a Sam Darnold, or maybe even better this year, at a much lower cost because of his age. And so it's something where I would rather just lean that way and then make up the difference with rookie picks than pay all the way up for a quarterback that I don't really believe in a ton. So anyway, that's how I feel about Adams. I think he has high-end wide receiver 2, potentially low-end wide receiver 1 upside. I don't think anybody's going to be trading first-round picks for him, so I think he's going to be a fine player that you can still invest in on your contenders, where you have the buying power and the need to add a productive wide receiver at a little bit of a lower cost. There's an interesting dynamic in Dynasty right now where we don't really have a lot of older productive wide receivers. For the past few years, you've been able to invest in guys like Tyreek Hill, Mike Evans, Davante Adams, Stephon Diggs, who were past their age apex or like nearing the end of their prime, but were still super productive, projectable as wide receiver 1 types. And now you have Adams kind of aging out of that, Hill aging out of that, Evans is aging out of that, Diggs is coming off the ACL tear, Hopkins has kind of dropped off, Kupp has dropped off. There's not really a lot of options out there where if you need high-end wide receiver production, you can kind of bite the bullet and pay for an older wide receiver that's not as expensive. For the most part, all of the top projecting wide receivers, like if you look at redraft rankings, they are the most expensive wide receivers in Dynasty. Jefferson and Chase and Thomas and Nico Collins and Puka Nacua and CeeDee Lamb. So Adams sticks out to me as kind of a rare occurrence of, hey, this is a guy you can go out and buy for less than a first who can potentially give you wide receiver 1 production. So I like that a lot. Let's take a look at his trades recently. Pull up the Adams trades and see if I'm correct about people not moving firsts for him, because that's, like I said, that's what I'd expect. Taking a look at this list, we've got Adams and a third for Metcalf and a second. I'm confused on that one. You shouldn't have to give the plus on top of Metcalf, who we will talk about next, by the way. Over here, we have Mike Evans for Adams and Schultz. I think I'd rather have Adams than Evans, but it's really, really close. Adams and Evans for 307 and 504. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely close between the two, but I think I'm going to lean towards Adams at this point, just because I think Stafford's better than Baker. I think Adams is better than Evans. I think either one could outscore the other, but I'd put a little bit more faith in Adams. Corin Bloom 43. Let me just address this real quick. Why are we assuming Tyreek is past it due to a season with Huntley at quarterback? No. I don't think that he's like washed. What I'm saying is he's aged to a point where he's not just like a locked and loaded top 5 wide receiver. Like I would put Adams in a similar camp to Hill right now, or vice versa, where I think Tyreek absolutely has the upside to score as a top 12 option. But I think at this point, I'm going to be kind of surprised if he's like a top 5 scorer, and his price reflects that uncertainty. And after coming off of a poor season, being a year older, he becomes a much more fragile investment in Dynasty. But again, they're both fragile, and I think both are reasonable investments for the same purpose of like trying to capture that high end wide receiver ceiling without paying the full price. Couple more deals here. We have Adams for the 205. That's I think a great deal to get Adams if you have that need at wide receiver. Adams and the 203 for Jamison Williams. I would make that deal in a heartbeat. Love the Adams side there. Wouldn't be trading a 2027 first for Adams and Pollard. I hate using future firsts this way. Absolutely no shot am I trading a first 2 years out for older players like this. It's just really, really risky. And there are much better ways that you can access production than going about it that way. So I would not do that. Getting Adams in the 203 for Joe Mixon in the 304. Love that. Getting Adams for Isaiah Pacheco. I like that a lot. So there's a lot of deals here where I think you can still go out and get Adams even today, even after signing, for a reasonable price where he can definitely help you, or he can definitely help you in Dynasty. So just want to put that out there. I'm going to go to Nico in the chat, one of our members. He asked about the Samaje Perine signing. I definitely don't have a whole segment on Samaje Perine, so I'll just hit this real quick. It is not really going to move Chase Brown up in my ranks, just because it's such an insignificant contract. He signed for, I think, like 2 years, $4.5 million or something. Like, he's basically being signed to be like a third down back, contingency type of piece. This type of signing really doesn't move the needle for me. I think if you're in the Bengals war room, right, the fact that you have Samaje Perine on your team, I don't think is going to prevent you from clicking the button on a wide receiver that you're a running back that you're high on if they're there when you pick. So, maybe it moves the odds 5% down or 10% down that they invest in a running back. But I'm not super swayed by it. I will say if they don't add anybody else significant, I agree that Chase Brown could be a top 6 to 8 redraft running back. That's definitely true. But I think there's still enough risk involved here where I'd be comfortable cashing out Chase Brown for like the 110, the 111. And while for some reason nobody seems to want to do that in the leagues where I have Chase Brown, there are a lot of trades in the database where that stuff is getting done. So anyway, that's how I feel about it. Going to move on here to our next move, which was not technically a free agency signing. It was a trade. DK Metcalf traded from the Seahawks to the Steelers for the price of a second-round pick. Gets a 4-year extension, $132 million. He was paid handsomely, as wide receivers tend to be these days. So this is kind of a gross move for fantasy. I mean, I think it's a good get for the Steelers. It's a shame they don't have a quarterback that can throw them the ball. But starting with DK, I think this is a pretty clear downgrade in situation. He's going to have a worse quarterback than Geno Smith, like guaranteed. It looks most likely right now that it's either going to be Russell Wilson or Aaron Rodgers. That's not very enticing to me. And on top of that, they're going to have lower passing volume than the Seahawks did. The Seahawks were pretty pass heavy. The Arthur Smith Steelers are not very pass heavy. Even when Russ was the quarterback last year, wasn't the case. So I don't really see upside here for Metcalf. He seems to just keep getting older every year without ever reproducing what he did in that one early season of his career. I think he's going to be a wide receiver 2 type of guy, and I think he's going to be very spike week dependent. So I'm going to probably like him more in best ball formats personally than in managed. I just think he's going to get like pretty low total targets relative to his ability. And then with George Pickens on the other side, it's kind of the same thing where it's like, it's hard to see the upside case for Pickens, who I think is a good player, because now he's competing with Metcalf, largely in the same areas of the field. And it's, again, an Arthur Smith passing game with a pretty bad quarterback. So I don't think either of these guys really has like realistic wide receiver one upside. But looking at Pickens, who's still young and could potentially switch teams either in season with a trade or after the next season, he seems like a guy where, like, if you wanted to write it down right now or put a pin in it to buy George Pickens in like week 5 when he's not really producing that much, I think that would make a whole lot of sense, because I think he is very talented. I think he's capable of consolidating a passing game around him, or at least a large portion of a passing game. And he could be gettable for like an early second at some point this season, or maybe a really late first, something like that. Nate, yeah, this isn't a free agency. I mean, I guess sort of like with Miles Sanders leaving the team. How do I feel about Chuba? So my feelings about Chuba Hubbard pretty much have like no relationship to Miles Sanders. Never viewed him as a threat. I guess what you're saying is almost the opposite, though. Like, letting Sanders go, they're going to have to add someone else. I think letting Sanders go was just totally a money thing. He was owed too much money. They're going to have to add something to the running back room, but I think they probably still look at Jonathan Brooks as a guy that they're going to get back next season. And naturally, there's just going to be a little bit of sunk cost fallacy, I think, around Jonathan Brooks. So I don't think they're going to make a big investment. I think they're going to be comfortable riding Chuba Hubbard through this season with, you know, a cheap backup behind him, and then having Hubbard and Brooks in the following year. So I'm pretty high on Hubbard. I think he's pretty safe. You know, he's very much a volume-driven player, but I do think that another type of low-end RB1, high-end RB2 season is pretty possible, pretty likely, I'd say, for Chuba Hubbard. And then from Bread, we have a question about Elijah Mitchell, who did sign with the Chiefs. I wasn't going to really touch on it here. Didn't think it was worth an entire like segment or anything, but I do think him going to the Chiefs is kind of interesting. Like, he's a good pickup. I would say he has probably less than a 10% chance to get a start. I mean, I don't know. That's a hard thing to quantify. Like, I think the Chiefs are going to add another running back in the draft probably. If Pacheco was to get hurt early in the season, it's possible Mitchell would get a start and the rookie would kind of be behind him, and then maybe the rookie would overtake him or something like that. I don't know. I would say definitely a guy that's worth rostering. I wouldn't be trading anything more than like a 4th round pick for him in Dynasty. But I've got an eyebrow raised for Mitchell. The other player I wanted to talk about in the DK trade, the last player for the Steelers, is Jaylen Warren. So Jaylen Warren is right now kind of the de facto RB1 for the Steelers, even though I don't think he's technically signed yet. He is a restricted free agent, which means it's really unlikely that he's going to go to another team, because they would have to like give stuff up for him. So I think he's more than likely going to be back with the Steelers, like almost certainly. And without a 2nd round pick, because they traded it for DK Metcalf, I think it's less likely that the Steelers are going to invest in a running back early in the draft. And this is something I think I saw Jacob Sanderson point out first. I've seen a few other people mention it. But if they don't have a 2nd round pick, I think it's really unlikely they're going to go out and spend their 1st round pick on a running back, given what else is going on with their team and where they pick in the draft. And then they're not going to be able to go out in the 2nd and sign like Caleb Johnson, or draft Caleb Johnson or Quinshon Judkins in the 2nd. So the earliest opportunity that they would have to draft a running back would be like the mid to late 3rd, wherever they're picking, back half of the 3rd round. And who's going to be the best available running back there? Like probably Devin Neal or Dylan Sampson or Ollie Gordon or something. I'm really just not that worried about a running back that they would take there, because I'm a pretty big believer in Warren's talent. And I think that the team showed us that they liked Warren's talent last year down the stretch when they sort of phased Najee out a little bit, gave Warren more of a focus, and then didn't even entertain the thought of bringing back Najee. So I think the team is high on Warren. I think he's been an underrated talent for a while. He's been really cheap in Dynasty all offseason, but I think he's still probably cheap enough to go out and get. I'm not going to pull up his trades recently, but if you want to go look, I bet he's still moving for late seconds. I would be fine. I'd be happy to send a late second for Jaylen Warren. And I think he's going to more than likely have a sizable role in this offense. I mean, he's going to have a role no matter what. We saw that even with Najee when they had the first round capital invested in him, that he had a role. He could have the 1A role though in this league. So in this team. So anyway, I like that for him. Cool. We're gonna move on to Aaron Jones here. Where do I have Chris Godwin in the list? Oh, I missed Chris Godwin somehow. Where's Chris Godwin? All right. Well, hold on a second. We're just going to throw that off the screen. We're going to talk about Chris Godwin real quick. It's not going to take that long. But apparently I didn't put him in the graphics here. So anyway, Chris Godwin returns to the Buccaneers for 3 years, $66 million, $44 million guaranteed. Best case scenario was probably to go to like the Patriots just because there was so much opportunity there. But returning to the Bucs is definitely not bad for Godwin. Like if you watched him last season, obviously it's not bad for him to be in this situation. He was absolutely killing it early in the year, top 5 points per game numbers when he was healthy. Now he's coming off a broken ankle. He lost Liam Cohn. Jalen McMillan did break out a little bit towards the end of the year. So I don't think we should be expecting last year's Chris Godwin. But I do think he's still going to be ahead of Jalen McMillan in the pecking order. I think he's the guy I would rather have of the two as far as seasonal projections are concerned. I think Jalen McMillan fever was getting a little bit out of hand when people thought Godwin might be moving to another team. But really the sell window on him is probably closed at this point. I'll still take an early second for McMillan if people are offering. I just don't know how many people are going to be offering now that the reality has set in that Godwin is back. So maybe people are still willing to buy because they think Evans is too old, or they're willing to buy McMillan for what he's going to do in 2026 or whatever. Personally, I'm not so convicted in the talent that I feel the need to like get in early and plant my flag there. I'd be happy to sell. But Godwin you can buy for mid-second, early second. You know, it depends on what we hear about his injury. I don't really know what to think of his injury. We don't have a lot of example cases, so I'd be wary of investing too highly in him, just knowing that he's 29, knowing that this injury could limit him to start the season. It's a little bit risky. But if you have him, I think you should feel pretty good about where he's at now. Houston Turner asks, thoughts on DeAndre Swift with Ben Johnson there? I feel like it's such a certainty that the Bears are going to invest in an early running back. I think it's like just so likely that they take one either in the first round or the second round. I think Ben Johnson kind of showed us what he thinks of DeAndre Swift when they were together in Detroit last time, which was making him into a committee back, not really giving him a lot of high value touches. I think that's what's most likely to happen again. He's getting cheaper and cheaper, but I would rather not be holding DeAndre Swift right now personally. But anyway, that's all I really had to say about Godwin. So I'm going to just move on. The last few guys are definitely not as impactful as the early few. But Aaron Jones goes back to the Vikings on a 2-year deal, $20 million, $13 million guaranteed. This was more money really than I expected to go to Aaron Jones. Like, this is decent money for him as a running back, especially a 31-year-old running back, to get $13 million guaranteed. Certainly doesn't preclude the Vikings from investing in the draft, but I think an early investment in a running back is at least somewhat less likely, given this contract. And for dynasty purposes, forget about the 2-year deal part. Like, Aaron Jones at 31 years old is a year-to-year player. You should not be paying money or paying a surplus because of it's a 2-year deal. He has really no value insulation at all at 31 years old, but he's been extremely cheap all offseason. I don't think he's going to get super expensive at all. Seems like a clear-cut, obvious guy that you go out and get when you have a depleted running back room. You don't have a ton of draft picks or value that you can play with. You can go out and trade, your 2-10 pick or whatever along with a 4th, and you can get Aaron Jones. He put up 14 points per game last year as the RB20. I'd expect a similar output this year if they don't sign anybody. Draft anybody. There's not really anybody to sign. If they don't draft anybody before like the 4th round, I'd expect Aaron Jones to probably do pretty much the same thing. So I'm going to talk about Daniel Jones in a few minutes. He's the last guy on my list, so we will get around to Daniel Jones and Javonte Williams, who was mentioned before. We are going to get to those two guys. We are getting down to the bottom of like the fantasy relevant signings here. But let's go ahead and take a look at our next name, which is Najee Harris. Najee Harris to the Chargers, 1 year, $9.5 million deal. The Chargers appear to be letting Dobbins walk. He hasn't signed anywhere yet, so we'll see. But I don't think they're going to bring back Dobbins after signing Harris. So I'm not a big believer in Najee's talent. Clearly, the Chargers aren't big believers either because they only gave him a 1 year deal, but it is decent money for a 1 year deal. I think the Chargers pretty much have all their options available to them with this signing. I think I'm not going to be surprised if they still go out and draft a running back early. I guess I'll be mildly surprised if it's in the first round, but I think an early running back is still totally in play. But I'm also not going to be surprised if they just ride with Najee Harris and add a late round option. Like, it's possible that the team either just really likes Harris or doesn't put a super high premium on the position and is willing to just ride with him and, another 4th or 5th round rookie. So we'll see. I'm probably going to be out on Najee in seasonal, like redraft formats, because I don't really believe in his upside. He's very volume dependent, and I would doubt that he's going to get the type of volume he saw in his first year in the league. What we've seen with him since then is that he's kind of a goal line back who's going to get decent number of carries between the 20s. He's probably not going to have an RB1 season. But I definitely think he could pay off mid-second investment in Dynasty. Now, we're getting an interesting note here from Styles Clash 619. He says there's a report that came out today that it's actually 1 year for $5.25 million. That's interesting. I did not hear that. If it's very incentive laden, that's even more evidence that the Chargers could easily go out and draft a running back. 1 year deal for this amount is not that much. So yeah, I mean, I'm willing to say round 1 running back is still on the table. If they love Omarion Hampton, I think this is not enough money or anything or enough of a commitment that they're going to not sign him. So here's what I'll say, just to wrap up the Najee thing. Make sure this is actionable for you guys. I'm totally cool to shop Najee Harris if I have him right now, because his value is absolutely up since this deal. In fact, we'll go look at his trades right now. I do not think that this is like a low risk spot where now he's just guaranteed to get 250 carries. And I'd say if the Chargers draft a running back, if the market is giving you any kind of a discount on that player because of the existence of Najee Harris, I would be heavily leaning into that player. I do not care about Najee Harris being there. That does not at all affect how I would feel about a rookie coming in. So looking at the trades from today, let's just take a look here. I suspect a lot of these are going to be second round picks that are not specific, but we'll take a look. 27 second and 305 for Harris. That seems fine. 26 second for Najee Harris, again, seems fine. Najee and Brian Robinson for Christian McCaffrey. I'm absolutely going to take the swing on the upside of McCaffrey there. I think it's fine to pay the 208 and the 311 for Najee Harris. That's fine. I'll probably take McCaffrey here over Najee in a second. I'll take the 204 over Najee Harris. I like that's early enough for me where I'd rather just have the earlier pick. 205 is probably right about where he should be valued. I'm still going to take the second there. Just gives me a little bit more flexibility, a little bit more safety, depending on how things go in the draft. 27 second again. You can see here the market is not going like absolutely crazy over him, but it's just going to depend on the league that you're in. So an earlier second, happy to cash out. Anything earlier than 206, I'm definitely happy to cash out. If you can get like a later second with some thirds thrown in or something, or you can use Najee to upgrade to like a legitimately good running back like Christian McCaffrey, something like that, definitely happy to do that too. So those are some moves that you could potentially make with Najee Harris. All right, 2 more guys here. We have Javonte Williams going to the Cowboys for $3 million. That's a very low amount of money, $3 million for 1 year deal. Major fall from grace for Javonte Williams ever since that ACL tear. And he really just hasn't been good. He was absolutely abysmal last year for the Broncos. Where'd Where did my video go? Oh, I think my camera just went to, hold on. Hold on, guys, 1 second. Not really sure what that was all about. We have to figure out what was going on there. If any of you are still here, we have Javonte Williams to the Cowboys. Interesting thing here is that Rico Dowdle was significantly better than Javonte Williams last year. And unless Dowdle goes out and signs somewhere for like significantly more than this, I don't know why they wouldn't just bring him back. Dallas has shown us over time, really ever since the Zeke signing, that they don't really value the running back position very highly. So I'm not necessarily surprised that they went after a cheap option. I guess I'm just kind of surprised that they didn't just stick with Dowdle. Either way, I'm not super excited about Javonte. Like, you think about Dowdle last year, he was great for a cheap running back option. Really wasn't a needle mover in fantasy. And I think Javonte genuinely just has like no juice at all. I think he would struggle as the full-time running back there. I think he would produce worse results than we saw from Najee or from Dowdle last season. And I think it's pretty likely, like, they only have Deuce Vaughn behind him. I think it's pretty likely they go out and invest a late round pick in a running back. That's going to be the player that I want. You know, if they go out and they get, I don't know, Devin Neal in the 4th round, if they draft Byshul Tootin in the 4th round, if they go out and get one of these later guys, even if they draft like I don't know, RJ Harvey or whoever, like if they draft somebody late, that's who I'm going to want, because I have no faith in Javonte Williams holding down a starting running back role at this point in his career. He just hasn't shown us anything post ACL that would suggest that he's the guy, that he is going to be an actual starter in the league. All right, so that's that. I don't suspect he's being moved for a whole lot in leagues right now, but I bet there are certain people that are trading seconds for him, thinking like this is the new Cowboys starting running back, and I would definitely capitalize on that. Okay, finally, we've got Daniel Jones. Signs with the Colts this morning. 1 year, $14 million. Seems like a lot, but that's just kind of the going rate at this point for backup quarterbacks. I did identify Jones as a good target late in startup drafts about a month ago when I did the startup video. And that seems like it's going to come to fruition, because this is one of the better spots that he could have landed. You know, Anthony Richardson is really, really fragile. He's in a tenuous situation. Kendrick, I would not say I believe in Daniel Jones over AR. Like, I don't believe that he is going to start the season ahead of Richardson. I don't think he is a better investment for an NFL team than Richardson, just because I think we know what Daniel Jones is, and what he is not a franchise quarterback. But what I also think is that the Colts organization is pretty desperate right now. Shane Steichen and Chris Ballard are both, I think, pretty likely to get fired if this season does not end in a playoff appearance. So I think Richardson is going to start week 1. I think he's going to have a very short leash. The team just doesn't seem to believe in him. Like, the staff has not spoken that highly of him. The way they treated him last year shows that they're not committed to the development of Richardson as a passer. So whether that's a correct approach or not for them, that's fine. I'll let people argue about that on Twitter. But as far as fantasy is concerned, I think Richardson is going to start. And I think at some point, Daniel Jones is probably going to play. I think whether it's 5 weeks, 6 weeks, 7 weeks, at some point the Colts are going to pull the plug on the Richardson experience and put in Daniel Jones. And while he's on the field there in Indianapolis, they have a decent infrastructure around him with Pittman and Downs and Jonathan Taylor and the Steichen scheme. So I'd expect Daniel Jones to put up like QB2 type numbers. You know, he runs a good bit too. So awesome player you could have invested in for like a 3rd round pick or 4th round pick earlier. At this point, probably going to cost you like an early 3rd to go out and get him. I don't think it's a super unreasonable thing to do if you have a couple of good quarterbacks where you just need sort of an emergency 3rd guy. It might be nice to see if you could get a quarterback that actually has a starting job, but this is one of those fail-safe guys, or someone it's nice to have on your bench if you can get him thrown into a deal, because if he is starting, you can probably use him in pretty much any situation. I forgot that I had misspoken there, and I was like genuinely about to go search to see if something had happened. That would be a really weird fit for the Colts, I'll say. Don't think that's actually going to happen, but you did have me going there for a minute. All right, so that's all with Daniel Jones. Just to wrap things up here, guys, a few names that are still out there that at least at the time that I started streaming had not signed on teams. That would be Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers. I'd say most likely one of those guys is going to the Giants and one's going to the Steelers. That would be my guess. Then you have Jameis Winston, I believe, is still out there. We'll see. I don't think he's going to go back to the Browns. It kind of seems like they burned that bridge when they benched him for DTR. But I don't know where he's going to land. He's going to be, a high upside backup wherever he goes. I still like rostering him in Dynasty. Then you have the older wide receivers in Stephon Diggs, Keenan Allen, Amari Cooper, DeAndre Hopkins. It makes sense that these guys have held out for a while. Like, none of them are going to get a huge contract. They're probably just waiting to see where the dust settles. And they probably want to find themselves on a team where they know that they're going to be a starter, and they're hopefully chasing a Super Bowl, right? So you could see these players go to contending teams, maybe even sign for less money than you might expect on those contending teams. They're all getting kind of near the end of their careers. I'll say I think Keenan Allen, just because of how he operates out of the slot, is the one that I would put the most faith in as a producer. I think Hopkins and Amari are very shaky, like borderline washed. I would not be moving anything of value really for them. And then Stephon Diggs, it kind of remains to be seen how he recovers from that ACL. But yeah, we'll see. Probably not massive needle movers for fantasy. And then at running back, we have Dowdle still, J.K. Dobbins, and Nick Chubb all on the market. And then finally, Evan Ingram is still out there at tight end, along with some guys like Jawan Johnson, Tyler Conklin. Evan Ingram is the interesting one. I heard he was visiting with the Broncos. That would be an interesting fit. I truly don't think Evan Ingram is all that good. And he's going to have to land in a good situation that doesn't care that he won't block and wants to get him targets underneath, even though he's not all that special or dynamic. But if he lands in the right spot, we know he has some tight end premium upside. But if he does land on a team like the Broncos, that could be interesting just because there isn't much competition. Yes, and Sean points out Cooper Kupp as well. I don't think he's been officially released yet, but he is going to be released, and then he will be another one of those older wide receivers switching teams. So those are some guys that are still out there. We'll wait and see. I'm going to have another video out later this week about the free agency, the whole free agency class. It'll be a little bit more focused on the major Dynasty takeaways. The last thing I wanted to say, guys, if you go over to the pinned comment in the chat or in the description, you do have the ability to get a Dynasty team breakdown where I can go through your entire Dynasty team, basically look at your roster, where it's sitting, what kind of value do you have, and then I can make suggestions based on your league settings, players you should be buying, players you should be selling, how you can get prepared for your rookie draft, whether you should be contending, rebuilding, customized advice. You can ask the questions, you can kind of lead that process. But I've been doing this for, about 9 months now. I've gotten some pretty good feedback on it. I think it's useful and actionable. So if you're interested in that, you can go check out the Google form for all the info on that, and that is pinned. But otherwise, we're going to get out of here. Everybody, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for interacting in the chat and watching, and thanks for supporting the channel. If you're not subscribed, go down below, hit the button. Really goes a long way. And I will be back soon with another Dynasty video.